Let me tell you something that might surprise you. The voice inside your head, the one you've been listening to your whole life, isn't always telling you the truth. In fact, sometimes it's leading you straight into disaster. I'm talking about your emotions, those powerful feelings that seem to know exactly what you need in any given moment. But here's the thing, they don't. Your emotions were designed for a different world. A world where quick reactions meant survival, where anger helped you fight off threats, where fear kept you from getting eaten. But we're not running from wild animals anymore. We're sitting in office meetings, navigating relationships, building careers, and trying to create lives we're proud of. And in this world, those same emotional reactions that once saved lives are now destroying them. Think about it. How many times have you said something in anger that you immediately regretted? How many opportunities have you avoided because anxiety whispered that you weren't ready? How many relationships have been damaged because you couldn't control your reaction in a heated moment? Every single day, you're making choices based on feelings that last minutes, but the consequences of those choices can last forever. But here's what I want you to understand. The most successful people in the world, the ones who seem to have it all figured out, they're not necessarily smarter than you. They don't have better circumstances. They haven't been handed some secret advantage. What they have is something far more powerful. They've learned to create space between what they feel and how they respond. They've mastered the art of not reacting. And that's what we're going to explore together. Not how to become some emotionless robot, not how to pretend you don't feel what you feel, but how to take back control of your life by understanding your emotions, working with them instead of against them, and choosing responses that align with who you want to be, not just how you happen to feel in any given moment. By the end of this journey, you're going to see yourself differently. You're going to understand why you react the way you do. And more importantly, you're going to have practical tools to change those reactions into conscious, powerful responses that serve your goals instead of sabotaging them. Ready? Let's dive in. Chapter 1. What your reactions are really costing you. Let's get real for a moment. Most people walk through life completely unaware of how much damage their emotional reactions are causing. They think it's normal to lose their temper sometimes. They believe it's just part of being human to get overwhelmed and shut down. They assume that passionate people are supposed to be a little volatile. And that assumption is quietly destroying their potential. Picture this scenario. You're in a team meeting, and a colleague questions your approach to a project. It's not even that aggressive, just a simple, "Have we considered other options?" But something about their tone, or maybe it's just the fact that they're questioning you in front of others, triggers something inside you. Your chest tightens, your face gets warm, and before you know it, you're defending yourself with an edge in your voice that makes the whole room uncomfortable. In that moment, you think you're standing up for yourself. You think you're being assertive. But what you've actually done is shown everyone in that room that you can't handle feedback gracefully. You've demonstrated that you prioritize your ego over collaboration. And that reputation, that single moment of reactivity, it stays with people. The next time there's an important project, they might think twice about including you, because they remember the person who couldn't handle a simple question. Or maybe it's at home. Your partner mentions something about the dishes, or the bills, or plans for the weekend. Something small. But you're already stressed from work, already tired, already running on fumes. So instead of hearing what they're actually saying, you hear criticism. You hear that you're not doing enough. And you fire back. You bring up something from last week, last month, maybe even last year. You say things designed to hurt, because you're hurting. And 10 minutes later, what started as a minor conversation has turned into a full-blown argument that's going to take days to repair. Here's what's happening in these moments, and this is crucial to understand. Your brain is running an ancient program designed for physical survival. When it perceives a threat, even a social threat like criticism or conflict, it activates your stress response. Hormones flood your system. Blood flow redirects away from the thinking part of your brain and toward the reactive part. You literally become less intelligent in these moments. And here's the part that makes it worse. These stress hormones don't just disappear when the situation is over. They linger in your system for hours, sometimes days. That argument you had in the morning affects every decision you make for the rest of the day. That stressful email triggers a cascade of reactions that ripples through your entire week. You're not just dealing with individual moments of reactivity. You're trapped in a cycle where each reaction makes the next one more likely. The research on this is clear and honestly pretty scary. People who regularly lose emotional control show actual physical changes in their brains. The part responsible for rational thinking, planning, and self-control actually gets smaller. Meanwhile, the part that triggers emotional reactions becomes more sensitive. It's like you're training your brain to be worse at the exact skill you need most. Think about the financial cost. Every opportunity you've missed because you were too anxious to take the risk. Every negotiation you've blown because you got defensive. Every business relationship you've damaged because you couldn't keep your cool under pressure. If you actually added up the dollar amount of what emotional reactivity has cost you over the years, it would probably make you sick. But the relationship cost might be even higher. Every time you lose control with someone you care about, you're withdrawing from an emotional bank account. You're creating distance. You're teaching them that they need to walk carefully around you. Your kids watch how you handle emotions and learn that this is normal. Your partner starts to wonder if they can count on you when things get tough. Your friends begin to question whether the relationship is worth the drama. And perhaps the most painful cost is what it does to how you see yourself. Because deep down, you know you could have handled that situation better. You know you let your emotions run the show when you should have been in control. And every time it happens, you lose a little more respect for yourself. You start to believe that this is just who you are, that you're the kind of person who can't keep it together when it matters. But here's the truth that's going to change everything for you. This pattern is not permanent. It's not written into your DNA. It's not an unchangeable part of your personality. It's a habit. And just like any habit, it can be broken and replaced with something better. The question is whether you're ready to do the work. Chapter 2: Why Your Brain Keeps Setting You Up to Fail. To change something, you first need to understand it. And when it comes to your emotional reactions, there's a lot going on beneath the surface that you probably don't realize. Your brain isn't trying to sabotage you, it's actually trying to protect you. The problem is, It's using outdated software for a world that no longer exists. Let me introduce you to a part of your brain that's running the show more than you'd like to admit. It's called the amygdala. Think of it as your personal alarm system, constantly scanning for danger and ready to sound the sirens at the first sign of trouble. When your ancestors faced actual physical threats, this alarm system saved their lives. Someone spots a predator, the amygdala triggers instant action. No time for careful analysis. But here's where it gets interesting. Your amygdala can't tell the difference between a real physical threat and a perceived social threat. That critical email from your boss triggers the exact same alarm as a physical attack. That awkward silence in a conversation activates the same stress response as facing an actual danger. Your brain treats a disagreement with your spouse like it's a matter of life and death. This is what psychologists call an emotional hijacking. Your rational brain, the part that can think clearly and make good decisions, basically goes offline. Blood flow gets redirected. Stress hormones flood your system, and suddenly you're operating on pure instinct, which would be great if you were actually facing a physical threat, but terrible when you're just trying to have a productive conversation. And it gets worse. Your amygdala learns from every experience, but it's terrible at learning the right lessons. Every time something triggers an emotional reaction, your brain files that away as evidence that the situation was dangerous. So things that upset you once become more likely to upset you again. Your brain is literally expanding the list of things it considers threats. This is why people who've been hurt in relationships become hypersensitive to any hint of rejection. Their alarm system has learned that emotional pain is dangerous, so it starts going off earlier and earlier, sometimes at things that aren't even real threats. It's trying to protect you, but it's actually making you more vulnerable. There's also this thing called negativity bias. Your brain is much better at remembering threats than rewards, problems than solutions, pain than pleasure. From a survival standpoint, this made sense. Forgetting about danger could get you killed. Forgetting about something pleasant was just unfortunate. But in today's world, this bias means your brain is constantly looking for problems, even when things are actually going pretty well. Here's another critical piece. Your emotional brain processes information way faster than your thinking brain. We're talking milliseconds versus half a second. By the time you're consciously aware of feeling angry or anxious, your body has already started responding. Your heart is already racing. Your muscles are already tense. You're already in reaction mode before you even realize what's happening. The modern world makes all of this worse. We're constantly bombarded with things that keep our alarm systems activated. Social media showing us everyone else's highlight reel. News designed to trigger fear and outrage. Work emails that demand immediate responses. Traffic jams. Financial stress. Relationship tensions. Your brain never gets a break from being on alert. And when your alarm system is constantly activated, it becomes hypersensitive. Things that wouldn't normally bother you start feeling overwhelming. Your threshold for reaction gets lower and lower. Eventually, even minor inconveniences can trigger major emotional responses. Sleep deprivation makes this exponentially worse. When you don't get enough quality sleep, Your amygdala becomes about 40% more reactive to negative stimuli. You're literally wired to lose control more easily when you're tired. Add in stress, poor nutrition, lack of exercise, and you've created the perfect storm for emotional reactivity. But here's where this gets hopeful. Understanding that your reactions are automatic doesn't mean you're powerless. It means you can learn to work with your brain instead of against it. You can train the thinking part of your brain to override the reactive part. You can build new neural pathways that support emotional control instead of emotional reactivity. The key is recognizing that there's always a gap between the trigger and your response. It might be microseconds, but it exists. And in that gap lies all your power. That's where you can choose to respond instead of react. That's where you take back control. Chapter 3: The 4 Levels of Emotional Mastery. Now that you understand what's happening in your brain, let's talk about where you are right now and where you can go. Because emotional control isn't just an on-off switch. It exists on a spectrum, and understanding exactly where you are on that spectrum is the first step to moving up to the next level. Most people operate at what I call Level 1, unconscious reactivity. If this is you, you're basically on autopilot. Something happens, you feel something, and you immediately act on that feeling without any conscious choice involved. Someone says something that bothers you, and the words are out of your mouth before you even realize you're speaking. You feel anxious, so you avoid the situation without thinking about it. You get excited and make impulsive decisions you'll regret later. At Level 1, you don't even realize you have a choice. You think your emotions are facts. You believe your reactions are justified. You say things like, "They made me angry," or "I can't help how I feel," or "I was just being honest." You have zero awareness of the space between what happens and how you respond. The biggest problem with Level 1 is that it makes you completely unpredictable. People never know which version of you they're going to get. You might be calm and reasonable one day and explosive the next, depending entirely on your mood and stress level. This unpredictability destroys trust. People can't count on you when things get difficult because they don't know if you'll rise to the occasion or fall apart. Level 2 is what I call conscious reactivity. This is where you start to wake up. You become aware that you're having an emotional reaction, but you choose to act on it anyway. You know you're angry. You know you're about to say something you'll probably regret. But you do it anyway because, in that moment, it feels justified. You recognize that you're being controlled by your emotions, but you tell yourself this situation is different, that this time your reaction is warranted. At Level 2, you often justify your reactions by pointing to other people's behavior. "Yes, I lost my temper, but did you see what they did?" Or, "I know I shouldn't have sent that message, but they deserved it." You have awareness, but no real control. You see the gap between trigger and response, but you choose not to use it. Level 2 is actually more frustrating than Level 1 because you know better, but you still can't seem to stop yourself. You get trapped in a cycle of reaction, guilt, promises to do better, and then more reaction. Each cycle erodes your confidence a little more. You start to believe that maybe you just don't have what it takes to control yourself. But then there's Level 3, conscious response. This is where real transformation begins. At level 3, you feel the emotion. You recognize it for what it is. And then you consciously choose how to respond based on your values and your long-term goals, not just your immediate feelings. You might feel angry, but you choose to speak calmly. You might feel anxious, but you choose to take action anyway. You might feel disappointed, but you choose to focus on solutions rather than dwelling on problems. You understand that emotions are information, not instructions. Feeling angry doesn't mean you have to act angry. Feeling scared doesn't mean you're actually in danger. At level 3, you've learned to create space between stimulus and response. You've trained yourself to pause, breathe, and think before you act. You have a toolkit of strategies that you can deploy in difficult moments. This doesn't happen overnight. It requires serious practice and self-awareness. But it's absolutely achievable, and it changes everything. Then there's level 4, emotional transformation. This is the highest level, where you don't just control your response to emotions, you actually transform the emotions themselves. Instead of just managing anger, you transform it into motivation. Instead of just coping with fear, you transform it into excitement. Instead of just dealing with disappointment, you transform it into curiosity about what you can learn. At level 4, you've developed such deep understanding of your emotional patterns that you can often prevent negative emotions from arising in the first place. You've restructured your thinking patterns and beliefs in ways that naturally generate more positive emotional states. When negative emotions do arise, you have the skills to quickly transform them into something more useful. This level isn't about positive thinking or pretending negative emotions don't exist. It's about developing such mastery over your internal state that you can consciously choose what to feel in any situation. You become the director of your emotional experience, not just an actor reading from a script someone else wrote. The journey from level 1 to level 4 doesn't happen in a straight line. You might be at level 3 with work stress, but still at level 1 with family dynamics. You might handle criticism like a champion, but completely lose it when dealing with financial pressure. That's normal. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. Most people never make it past level 2 because they don't understand that emotional mastery is a skill that can be developed. They think some people are just naturally good at controlling their emotions, while others aren't. This is completely false. Emotional control is like physical fitness. Some people might have better starting points, but anyone can get stronger with consistent training. So here's the question you need to ask yourself. What level are you operating at right now? And more importantly, what level do you want to be operating at? Because once you make the decision to upgrade your emotional operating system, everything in your life begins to change. Chapter 4. The Pause Method for Immediate Emotional Control. Okay, so you understand what's happening in your brain. You know which level you're operating at. But what do you actually do when you're in the middle of an emotional storm? When everything inside you is screaming to react, to say something, to do something you'll probably regret later. You need a system. Something simple enough to remember when your thinking brain has basically checked out for lunch. Most advice about emotional control is useless in these moments because it requires you to think clearly, which is exactly what you can't do when you're emotionally hijacked. What you need is something automatic, something you can deploy even when your rational mind has temporarily left the building. That's where the pause method comes in. I want you to think of pause as your emergency protocol. 4 simple steps that you can take in sequence to interrupt an emotional reaction before it destroys something you care about. This method is based on solid neuroscience and has been tested in situations way more intense than what most of us face in daily life. From emergency rooms to conflict zones to high-stakes negotiations, this framework works. P stands for physical stop. The moment you notice you're having an emotional reaction, you must physically stop whatever you're doing. If you're typing a message, hands off the keyboard. If you're in an argument, close your mouth. If you're about to make an impulsive decision, step back from the situation. This physical stopping action sends a signal to your brain that you're taking control. The trick is catching yourself early. Your body always gives you clues before your emotions completely take over. Maybe your heart starts racing, your jaw tightens, your breathing gets shallow, you feel heat in your face or a knot in your stomach. These physical sensations are your early warning system. Most people miss these signals because they're too caught up in their thoughts or the external situation. Learn to tune into your body, and you'll gain precious seconds to implement control strategies before it's too late. And I mean really stop. Not halfway, not let me just finish this sentence. Complete, immediate disengagement. Yes, it might feel awkward, especially if you're mid-conversation. But that temporary awkwardness is nothing compared to the permanent damage of words you can't take back. A stands for anchor your breathing. Once you've stopped, you need to activate your body's natural calm-down system. And the fastest way to do that is through your breath. I'm not talking about any random breathing. I'm talking about a specific pattern that literally changes your nervous system state. Breathe in slowly through your nose for 4 counts. Hold that breath for 4 counts. Then breathe out slowly through your mouth for 6 counts. Notice that the exhale is longer than the inhale. This is crucial. That extended exhale activates your vagus nerve, which is like a master switch for your relaxation response. When you're emotionally activated, your fight or flight system is running the show. It's flooding you with stress hormones and preparing you for action. This breathing pattern activates the opposite system, your rest and recovery mode. It begins to counteract the stress response and helps bring your rational thinking back online. You need to repeat this at least 3 times. Don't rush it. The goal isn't just to calm down enough to function. It's to calm down enough to think clearly and make good decisions. This might take 30 seconds, or it might take 5 minutes. Give yourself whatever time you need. Your future self will thank you. U stands for understand the reality. Now that you've stopped the action and started regulating your nervous system, you need to get clear on what's actually happening. Not what you think is happening, not what you're afraid is happening, what's actually, objectively happening. Ask yourself, what emotion am I feeling right now? What thoughts are running through my mind? What physical sensations am I experiencing? And here's the crucial question. What is actually happening in the external situation as opposed to what I'm interpreting or assuming? This is where most people go wrong. They confuse interpretation with reality. Someone doesn't text back, and you interpret that as rejection or disrespect. A colleague challenges your idea, and you interpret that as a personal attack. Your partner seems quiet, and you interpret that as evidence they don't love you anymore. During this step, practice separating facts from stories. What did the person actually say or do? What hard evidence do you have for the narrative you're creating about their intentions? What other explanations might exist that you haven't considered? Often, when you really examine the situation objectively, you'll discover that your emotional reaction was based on assumptions rather than reality. The person who didn't text back was in a meeting. The colleague who challenged your idea was trying to make the project better. Your partner was quiet because they were worried about a work deadline, not because they fell out of love with you. Also, observe your own internal state with curiosity, not judgment. Don't beat yourself up for having an emotional reaction. Don't tell yourself you're weak or broken. Just notice what's happening with the same neutral interest you might have in watching a documentary. This emotion is arising. This thought pattern is active. This physical sensation is present. Information, not evaluation. S stands for select your response. Now that you've stopped, regulated your breathing, and understood what's actually happening, you can choose how to respond. But this isn't about jumping right back into action. This is about making a conscious choice based on your values, your goals, and what kind of person you want to be. Ask yourself, what response would be most aligned with who I want to be? If my goal is to maintain this relationship, what response would serve that goal? If my goal is to solve this problem, what response would be most effective? If my goal is to maintain my integrity and self-respect, what would support that? Sometimes the best response is no response, at least not immediately. You might decide you need more information. You might realize you're still too activated to respond in a way that aligns with your values. You might determine that the situation doesn't actually require a response from you at all. Other times, you'll decide to engage, but differently than you would have if you'd reacted immediately. Instead of defending yourself, you might ask questions. Instead of making accusations, you might express how you interpreted something and ask for clarification. Instead of escalating, you might de-escalate. E stands for execute with intention. Once you've selected your response, follow through with complete commitment. Don't second-guess yourself. Don't apologize for taking time to think. You've done the work of creating space between stimulus and response. Now trust the decision you made from that calmer, clearer state. If you decided not to respond immediately, honor that decision. Set a time to revisit the situation when you're in a better state. If you decided to engage, do it with the full intention of embodying your values and working toward your goals, not just relieving emotional pressure. The pause method becomes more powerful the more you practice it. At first, you might only remember to use it after you've already reacted. That's okay. That's actually valuable because it helps you develop awareness of your patterns. Gradually, you'll start catching yourself earlier. Maybe after you've started to react, but before you've done serious damage. Eventually, you'll be able to implement the method at the first sign of emotional activation. The goal isn't to never have emotional reactions. The goal is to never let those reactions control your behavior in ways that work against your best interests. The pause method gives you a practical, repeatable process for creating space between what happens to you and how you respond. And in that space lies all your power.
Chapter 5. Advanced Techniques for Emotional Regulation. Once you've got the pause method down and can reliably interrupt your emotional reactions before they spiral, you're ready for the next level. These advanced techniques take you beyond damage control and into the realm of emotional optimization. This is where you stop just managing your emotions and start actually using them as tools for better decision-making and peak performance. The first technique is perspective shifting. Most people think their emotions are caused by what happens to them. Something bad happens, they feel bad. Someone treats them poorly, they feel upset. But that's not actually how it works. Your emotions are caused by how you interpret what happens, not by the
events themselves. Change your interpretation, and you change your emotional experience. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine you're giving a presentation, and you notice several people looking at their phones. Your first interpretation might be that they're bored, that your presentation sucks, that you're failing. This interpretation triggers anxiety, embarrassment, maybe self-doubt. But what if you reframed it? What if you interpreted their phone usage as them being so engaged with your ideas that they're taking notes or looking up related information? Same external situation, completely different emotional response. The key is developing multiple plausible interpretations for any situation. When something triggers a negative emotion, force yourself to generate at least 3 different explanations. One more positive than your initial reaction, one more negative, and one completely neutral. This exercise helps you recognize that your first interpretation is often not the only one, and usually not the most accurate one. Your brain jumps to conclusions based on incomplete information, past experiences, and various biases. Perspective shifting forces you to slow down and consider other possibilities. Then you can choose the interpretation that's most useful for your goals and well-being. The second technique is emotional labeling. This involves getting extremely specific about identifying what you're actually feeling. Most people have a very limited emotional vocabulary. They know they feel good or bad, happy or sad, but they can't distinguish between frustration and disappointment, anxiety and excitement, anger and hurt. This lack of precision makes emotional regulation much harder. It's like trying to fix a complex machine when all you can say is, "It's broken." The more specifically you can identify what you're feeling, the more specifically you can address it. Here's what makes this powerful. When you put a precise name to an emotion, you activate the thinking part of your brain and reduce activity in the reactive part. Research shows that people who regularly practice emotional labeling have better emotional regulation, lower stress levels, and improved decision-making abilities. So instead of just feeling bad, get specific. Are you disappointed, frustrated, overwhelmed, anxious, angry, hurt, discouraged? Each of these emotions has different causes and requires different responses. The more precise you can be, the more control you'll have. The third technique is body-based regulation. Your emotional state and your physical state are intimately connected. By consciously changing your physical state, you can directly influence your emotional state. This is huge because sometimes your mind is too caught up in the emotional storm to think its way out. But your body can lead the way. Progressive muscle relaxation is incredibly effective. Starting with your toes and working up to your head, systematically tense each muscle group for 5 seconds, then release, and notice the relaxation. This helps discharge the physical energy that builds up during emotional activation and signals your nervous system that it's safe to relax. Cold exposure is another powerful tool. Splashing cold water on your face, taking a cold shower, or even holding ice cubes can activate your body's adaptation response and quickly shift your nervous system from stress mode to recovery mode. The shock of cold forces your body to adapt, which builds resilience over time. Movement and exercise are also crucial. When you're emotionally activated, your body is literally prepared for physical action. If you don't give it an outlet for that energy, it stays trapped and maintains the emotional state. Even just a few minutes of vigorous movement can help process that energy and return your system to baseline. The fourth technique is timeline shifting. This involves consciously changing your time perspective to reduce the emotional impact of current difficulties. When you're in the middle of an emotional reaction, your brain tends to catastrophize. It assumes current problems will last forever or have permanent consequences. Timeline shifting works by asking yourself how you'll feel about this situation at different points in the future. How will you feel about this in 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year? This exercise helps put temporary problems in perspective and reduces their emotional charge. You can also connect with your future self. Imagine yourself 5 years from now, having successfully navigated this situation and many others like it. What advice would that future version of yourself give you about handling the current challenge? This perspective often reveals that the situation is less serious than it initially appeared and suggests more effective responses than emotional reactivity. The fifth technique is energy accounting. Your capacity for emotional regulation isn't unlimited. You have a finite amount of mental energy each day, and emotional regulation requires a significant portion of it. If you're constantly having to regulate intense emotions, you'll eventually experience decision fatigue and lose the ability to maintain control. This means being strategic about when and where you expend your emotional regulation resources. Maybe you avoid certain situations when you're already stressed or tired. Maybe you schedule difficult conversations for times when you're most mentally fresh. Maybe you build recovery time into your day to restore your capacity. Sleep, nutrition, exercise, and stress management all play crucial roles in maintaining your emotional regulation energy. When you're sleep-deprived, hungry, or chronically stressed, your capacity for emotional control drops dramatically. Taking care of your physical health isn't separate from emotional mastery. It's an essential component of it. These advanced techniques require practice. Don't try to implement all of them at once. Choose 1 or 2 that resonate most with you and focus on developing real competency before adding others. Remember, the goal isn't to never feel difficult emotions. The goal is to respond to those emotions in ways that align with your values and support your long-term goals. Chapter 6. Building Emotional Resilience for the Long Game. Controlling your emotions in the moment is important, but it's only half the equation. The other half is building the kind of deep, unshakable emotional resilience that makes you not just survive challenges,
but actually get stronger because of them. This is what separates people who occasionally manage their emotions from people who have fundamentally transformed their relationship with difficulty. Most people approach resilience all wrong. They wait until they're in crisis to try developing coping skills. They wait until they're overwhelmed to build stress management techniques. They wait until they're burned out to create better boundaries. This is like waiting until you're drowning to learn how to swim. True resilience is built during calm periods, not during storms. It's developed through consistent daily practices that strengthen your emotional immune system so that when challenges hit, you're already prepared. Just like physical fitness, emotional fitness requires regular training, not just crisis intervention. The foundation of resilience is baseline optimization. This is the daily maintenance of your mental, emotional, and physical state that keeps you operating at peak capacity. When your baseline is strong, you can handle way more stress before reaching your breaking point. When your baseline is weak, even minor difficulties can overwhelm you. Sleep is non-negotiable. When you're sleep-deprived, the reactive part of your brain becomes hyperactive, while the rational part becomes sluggish. You're more likely to have emotional reactions and less able to control them. The research is crystal clear. People who sleep less than 7 hours consistently have dramatically reduced emotional regulation capacity. But it's not just about quantity. Quality matters too. Your bedroom needs to be dark, cool, and quiet. No screens for at least an hour before bed. No caffeine after early afternoon. A consistent sleep schedule that doesn't vary much, even on weekends. These aren't suggestions. They're requirements if you want to maintain emotional control under pressure. Nutrition plays a massive role that most people completely ignore. Your brain runs on glucose, and when your blood sugar is unstable, so are your emotions. Skipping meals, eating processed foods, consuming too much caffeine, drinking alcohol, all of these create conditions that make emotional regulation much harder. The solution isn't complicated, but it requires discipline. Eat protein with every meal to stabilize blood sugar. Get omega-3 fatty acids for brain health. Stay hydrated. Avoid foods that cause inflammation. Your emotional state is directly
connected to your nutritional state, whether you realize it or not. Physical exercise is not optional. When you exercise regularly, you increase production of chemicals that literally grow new brain cells and strengthen neural connections. You also boost neurotransmitters that regulate mood and motivation. Perhaps most importantly, exercise provides controlled stress that builds your capacity to handle uncontrolled stress. The second pillar is mental flexibility. This is your ability to see situations from multiple perspectives, generate creative solutions, and adapt your thinking when circumstances change. People with low mental flexibility get stuck in rigid thought patterns that amplify emotional reactions. People with high mental flexibility can find opportunity in adversity and maintain emotional balance even when things don't go according to plan. One of the best ways to build mental flexibility is through exposure to different perspectives. Read books by people who disagree with you. Have conversations with people from different backgrounds. Travel to places that challenge your assumptions. The goal isn't to abandon your values, but to expand your mental models and increase your ability to see situations from multiple angles. Another crucial component is developing comfort with uncertainty. Most emotional reactions are triggered by situations that feel uncertain or out of control. If you can learn to be comfortable not knowing exactly how things will turn out, you'll be much less likely to have emotional reactions when life doesn't follow your script. The third pillar is purpose and meaning. People who have a clear sense of purpose are much more resilient when facing adversity. When you know why you're doing something, when you can connect current struggles to a larger purpose, it becomes much easier to maintain emotional control when things get difficult. This doesn't require having some grand mission to change the world. It can be as simple as being a good parent, building something you're proud of, or contributing positively to your community. The key is that your goals and activities need to be connected to something larger than immediate comfort or pleasure. Regularly reflecting on your values helps maintain this sense of meaning. What do you stand for? What kind of person do you want to be? What impact do you want to have? When you're clear on these questions, choosing long-term thinking over short-term reactions becomes much easier. The fourth pillar is strategic stress exposure. Just like your muscles need progressive challenge to grow stronger, your emotional regulation system needs controlled stress to develop greater capacity. If you only practice emotional control during easy times, you won't have the strength to maintain it during difficult ones. This means intentionally putting yourself in situations that are slightly outside your comfort zone on a regular basis. Take on challenging projects. Have difficult conversations you've been avoiding. Set goals that require you to grow. The key is choosing your challenges rather than letting life choose them for you. Cold exposure, public speaking, endurance training, meditation retreats. All of these are excellent forms of strategic stress exposure. They put you in controlled situations where you have to manage discomfort while maintaining composure. This training translates directly to handling uncontrolled stress in your daily life. The final pillar is recovery and restoration. Your emotional regulation system needs regular maintenance. If you're constantly pushing without taking time to restore your energy, you'll eventually burn out and lose the ability to maintain control. Build recovery into your routine. Daily meditation. Weekly time in nature without technology, monthly periods of complete disconnection, annual retreats that allow for deep rest. Recovery isn't a luxury, it's a requirement for sustained high performance. Building resilience is a long-term project. You can't develop it overnight, but you also can't afford to wait until you need it to start building it. The time to strengthen your foundation is now, while you're relatively calm. Because when the storms hit, and they will, you want to be the person who remains steady while others are falling apart. Chapter 7. The Science Behind Your Transformation. Everything you've learned so far becomes infinitely more powerful when you understand what's actually happening in your brain as you practice emotional control. This isn't just feel-good psychology or ancient wisdom, though both have their place. This is hard science. Real, measurable changes in brain structure and function that occur when you consistently practice emotional mastery. Understanding the science serves two purposes. First, it gives you confidence that the work you're doing is creating actual, lasting change, not just temporary improvements. Second, it helps you optimize your practice by understanding which specific actions create the most significant neurological changes. Let's start with neuroplasticity, which is probably the most exciting discovery in neuroscience in the past few decades. For most of human history, scientists believed that adult brains were fixed, that once you reached a certain age, your brain was basically set in stone. If you had certain emotional patterns, you were stuck with them for life. We now know that's completely false. Your brain is constantly rewiring itself based on your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. It's like a river that's always carving new channels through the landscape. Every time you choose a thoughtful response over an emotional reaction, you're literally building new brain circuitry that makes emotional control easier and more automatic next time. Here's what's really interesting. Your brain doesn't distinguish between what you're actually experiencing and what you're vividly imagining. When you mentally rehearse staying calm under pressure, your brain creates the same neural connections as if you actually stayed calm under pressure. This means you can accelerate your emotional development by regularly visualizing yourself handling challenging situations with grace. The most dramatic changes occur in your prefrontal cortex, which is essentially your brain's executive center. This is the part responsible for planning, decision-making, impulse control, and emotional regulation. People who regularly practice emotional control techniques show increased gray matter density in this area. They literally have more brain tissue dedicated to rational thinking and self-control. Meanwhile, that alarm system we talked about earlier, the one constantly scanning for threats, actually shrinks in people who practice emotional regulation. This doesn't mean you become emotionless. It means your threat detection system becomes more accurate and less likely to trigger false alarms. You develop the ability to distinguish between real threats that require immediate action and perceived threats that can be handled through thoughtful response. There's another crucial region called the anterior cingulate cortex. This area helps you notice when you're having an emotional reaction and redirects your attention toward more constructive responses. People with stronger anterior cingulate cortexes are better at catching themselves before reactions spiral out of control. They can spot the warning signs earlier and intervene more effectively. Your insula, which processes bodily sensations and connects them to emotional experiences, also becomes more developed with practice. This enhanced body awareness is what allows you to notice those early warning signs we talked about. The racing heart, the tense muscles, the shallow breathing, before they become full-blown reactions. One of the most fascinating discoveries is how emotional regulation practice changes what scientists call the default mode network. This is the network of brain regions that's active when you're not focused on a specific task. In people who don't practice emotional control, this network tends to generate repetitive, often negative thought patterns. Worry, rumination, self-criticism become the brain's default state. But in people who regularly practice emotional regulation, the default mode network becomes quieter and more peaceful. Their baseline state shifts from agitated and reactive to calm and centered. This means you're not just getting better at handling difficult moments. You're actually changing what your brain does during the moments in between. The neurotransmitter systems in your brain also undergo significant changes. Serotonin, which regulates mood and social behavior, increases with regular practice. Dopamine, which governs motivation and reward, becomes more stable. GABA, your brain's primary calming neurotransmitter, increases, helping reduce anxiety and promote feelings of calm. Perhaps most importantly, stress hormones become much better regulated. Chronic elevated cortisol destroys brain cells, impairs memory, weakens your immune system, and creates a cascade of health problems. People who master emotional control show lower baseline cortisol and faster recovery after stressful events. They're literally protecting their brains and bodies from the damaging effects of chronic stress. There's also this fascinating thing called mirror neurons. These are brain cells that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing it. This means that spending time with people who have good emotional control literally trains your brain to have better emotional control. Your brain is actually mimicking their neural patterns. Conversely, spending time with emotionally reactive people trains your brain to be more reactive. You're not just influenced by their behavior. Your brain is actually copying their neural patterns through mirror neuron activity. This is why choosing your social environment carefully is so crucial. It's literally shaping your brain. The research on meditation provides some of the clearest evidence of how these practices change brain structure. Studies show that just 8 weeks of regular meditation creates measurable changes in brain structure. The part associated with learning and memory increases in size. The alarm system decreases in reactivity. The thinking brain becomes more active and better connected to other regions. But you don't need to become a meditation master to benefit from these changes. Any consistent practice that involves observing your thoughts and emotions without immediately reacting to them will create similar brain changes. The key factors are consistency, attention, and non-reactive awareness. Breathing exercises create particularly rapid changes because they directly influence the vagus nerve, which connects your brain to your body's relaxation response. That pause method breathing pattern we talked about literally activates your parasympathetic nervous system within seconds, creating immediate neurological changes that promote calm thinking. When you consciously tense and release muscle groups through progressive relaxation, you're strengthening the connection between your thinking brain and your motor cortex. You're practicing voluntary control over your body's stress response. This builds neural pathways that make it easier to consciously relax when you're emotionally activated. The perspective-shifting techniques work by strengthening connections between your thinking brain and your emotional brain. Every time you consciously choose a different interpretation of events, you're building neural highways that make optimistic, solution-focused thinking more automatic and pessimistic, problem-focused thinking less automatic. Understanding these mechanisms helps you stay motivated during difficult periods. When you're struggling to control your reactions, when old patterns seem to be reasserting themselves, when progress feels slow, remember that your brain is literally rewiring itself at the cellular level. Changes that feel invisible are creating measurable transformations in your neural architecture. The timeline varies depending on the specific technique and consistency of practice, but most people notice differences in emotional reactivity within 2 to 4 weeks of regular practice. Significant structural changes in brain gray matter typically occur within 8 to 12 weeks. Complete transformation of emotional patterns usually takes 6 months to 2 years of consistent practice. This is both encouraging and sobering. Encouraging because it means lasting change is absolutely possible and backed by hard science. Sobering because there are no shortcuts or quick fixes. Emotional mastery requires the same patient, consistent training as physical fitness or any other skill.
But here's what makes it worthwhile. Once these neural changes become established, they tend to be permanent. Unlike temporary behavior modifications that require constant effort to maintain, neuroplastic changes create new baseline patterns that become your brain's default operating mode. The person who struggled to control emotions becomes the person who naturally responds with wisdom. Chapter 8. Mastering Emotional Control in Ode.
High-stakes moments. Everything you've learned gets tested when the pressure is intense and the stakes are high. It's one thing to practice emotional control during your morning routine or when dealing with minor annoyances. It's entirely different when you're facing a situation that could impact your career, your relationships, or something you've worked years to build. High-stakes situations strip away the social niceties and reveal who you really are underneath. Most people perform worse under pressure because they let the intensity overwhelm their rational thinking. But there are people who actually get better under pressure. They've trained specifically for these moments. The difference isn't talent or luck. It's preparation. Specifically, emotional preparation. The first key to pressure performance is understanding that pressure is internal, not external. The situation itself is neutral. It only becomes pressurized when your mind interprets it as overwhelming or threatening. Two people can face identical circumstances and have completely different stress responses based on how they frame the situation. This means controlling pressure starts with controlling your narrative. Instead of telling yourself, "This is terrible, I can't handle this, everything's falling apart," you need to reframe in terms that support performance. "This is challenging, but I have the skills to handle it. This is an opportunity to prove what I'm capable of. This is exactly what I've been training for." Elite performers across every field use this kind of reframing. They don't pretend difficult situations aren't difficult. They acknowledge reality while choosing interpretations that enhance rather than diminish their performance. The second key is physiological preparation. Your nervous system needs to be trained to handle intense activation without becoming overwhelmed. This is where stress inoculation becomes crucial. Just like vaccines expose your immune system to small amounts of a pathogen to build resistance, stress inoculation exposes your nervous system to controlled amounts of stress to build resilience. Cold exposure is one of the most effective forms. When you deliberately expose yourself to cold water or air, you activate the same stress response that gets triggered during high-pressure situations. But because you're choosing the exposure voluntarily, you can practice maintaining calm while your body is in a state of stress. The key isn't just to endure the cold, it's to practice your emotional control techniques while exposed. Breathe slowly and deeply. Relax your muscles. Keep your mind focused on the present rather than anticipating how much longer it will last. These are exactly the same skills you need during high-stakes situations. High-intensity exercise serves a similar function. When you push yourself to physical limits during workouts, you're training your ability to maintain mental discipline while your body is under extreme stress. Discomfort during intense exercise is similar to the discomfort during pressure situations. Learning to stay mentally tough during physical challenges translates to staying mentally tough during emotional challenges. The third key is attention management. Under pressure, your mind tends to scatter in multiple directions. You start thinking about everything that could go wrong, everyone who's watching, all the consequences of failure. This divided attention makes peak performance impossible because excellence requires complete focus on the task at hand. The solution is developing laser focus. This is the ability to concentrate all your mental energy on the specific actions you need to take right now. Everything else becomes background noise that you acknowledge but don't engage with. Developing this focus requires practice during low-pressure times. Set a timer for 10 minutes and choose a single task. Every time your mind wanders, gently bring it back. Start simple, then gradually increase complexity and add distractions. During high-stakes situations, use the same technique. Identify the most important action you need to take right now and focus completely on that. Not the next 10 steps, just the immediate next step. The fourth key is emotional granularity. Most people experience pressure as generic stress or anxiety. But these are umbrella terms covering many different specific emotions. The more precisely you can identify what you're actually feeling, the more effectively you can address it. Are you anxious about the outcome or excited about the challenge? Overwhelmed by complexity or focused by clarity? Afraid of failure or motivated to succeed? The physiological sensations might be similar, but the meanings and appropriate responses are very different. Practice emotional labeling during calm periods so you can access this skill during intense ones. Keep an emotion journal. Learn the difference between frustration and disappointment, anxiety and excitement, anger and hurt. The more nuanced your vocabulary, the more precisely you can regulate your state. The fifth key is process focus versus outcome focus. Under pressure, most people become obsessed with results. They think constantly about whether they'll succeed or fail, what others will think, what the consequences will be. This outcome focus creates additional pressure and divides attention away from the actions that actually determine outcomes. Elite performers focus on process. They concentrate on executing the specific skills they've trained, trusting that good processes lead to good outcomes. A surgeon focuses on making precise movements, not on whether the patient will survive. A negotiator focuses on asking good questions and listening carefully, not on whether they'll close the deal. This process focus is liberating because it puts you in control of what you can actually control. You can't directly control outcomes, which always depend partly on factors outside your influence. But you can control your effort, attention, technique, and attitude. The sixth key is contingency planning balanced with present focus. High-pressure situations often involve unexpected developments. When you haven't prepared for different scenarios, the uncertainty itself becomes an additional source of pressure. Think through multiple scenarios in advance and develop specific plans for each. What will I do if this happens? What about if that happens? How will I respond if things go sideways? This mental rehearsal builds confidence and reduces cognitive load during actual situations. But once you're in the situation, focus on executing your current plan rather than constantly second-guessing. The time for planning is before the pressure, not during it. The final key is recovery and reflection. High-pressure situations take a toll on your mental and emotional resources. Even when you handle them well, you need to deliberately decompress afterward. Use breathing exercises, movement, or relaxation techniques to help your nervous system return to baseline. Then, once recovered, reflect with curiosity rather than judgment. What worked? What could improve? What did you learn about yourself? How can you apply these lessons to future situations? This reflection consolidates learning and builds confidence for handling similar challenges. Remember, pressure is actually a privilege. It means you're in situations that matter, facing challenges worthy of your best effort. Most people spend their lives avoiding pressure and never discover what they're truly capable of. When you learn to thrive under pressure, you gain access to opportunities that remain closed to people who crumble when stakes are high. Chapter 9. Transforming Negative Emotions into Rocket Fuel. Most people treat negative emotions like toxic waste that needs immediate disposal. They try to suppress anger, avoid sadness, eliminate fear, escape frustration. This approach is not only ineffective, it's actually counterproductive. Negative emotions contain enormous amounts of energy and information that, when properly channeled, can become fuel for achieving your most ambitious goals. The problem isn't that you experience negative emotions. The problem is that you don't know how to transform them into something useful. You let them drain your energy instead of directing it toward productive action. You let them cloud judgment instead of using them to clarify priorities. You let them paralyze you instead of using them to motivate breakthrough performance. Every negative emotion is your psyche's way of communicating important information about your situation, values, and goals. Anger tells you something important is being threatened. Fear tells you you're facing uncertainty or potential loss. Sadness tells you you've lost something valuable. Frustration tells you you're being blocked from something you want. Instead of trying to make these emotions disappear, you need to learn how to decode their messages and channel their energy in productive directions. This is the difference between emotional suppression, which weakens you, and emotional transformation, which strengthens you. Let's start with anger, perhaps the most misunderstood emotion. Most people either explode with anger, destroying relationships, or suppress it, letting it build until it explodes anyway, or turns into bitterness. Both approaches waste the enormous energy that anger contains. Anger is your emergency response to perceived injustice or threat. It floods your system with energy and focus to help you fight back. This energy can be destructive when directed at people through blame or aggression. But it can be incredibly productive when directed toward solving problems, overcoming obstacles, and creating positive change. The key to transforming anger is separating the energy from the target. Instead of directing anger at the person or situation that triggered it, redirect that energy toward constructive action. Use the focus and determination anger provides to work harder on your goals, solve problems more aggressively, push through obstacles that would normally stop you. Some of the greatest achievements in history have been fueled by transformed anger. Entrepreneurs who built billion-dollar companies because they were angry about problems not being solved. Athletes who dominated their sports because they were angry about being underestimated. activists who changed the world because they were angry about injustice. Fear is another emotion most people handle completely wrong. They try to eliminate it or let it paralyze them. But fear contains crucial information about what matters most to you. You only feel afraid of losing things that are valuable, or failing at things that are important. Fear is your internal guidance system, pointing toward what you need to protect or pursue. The goal isn't to eliminate fear, but to act despite it. This is what courage actually is. Not the absence of fear, but intelligent action in the presence of fear. Every time you act courageously, you build confidence and reduce fear's grip on your life. Fear also serves as an excellent filter for opportunities. If something doesn't scare you at least a little, it's probably not challenging enough to be worth pursuing. The goals that frighten you are usually the ones with the highest potential for growth. Sadness and disappointment are emotions most people avoid at all costs. But they contain some of the most valuable information your psyche can provide. Sadness shows you what you truly value by revealing what hurts to lose. Disappointment shows you what you genuinely want by revealing what hurts not to achieve. Most people experience sadness as pure loss, but it's actually a clarifying experience. It helps you distinguish between what you think you want and what you actually want, between what others expect you to value and what you authentically value. Sadness also creates empathy and connection with others who've experienced similar losses. Many of the most meaningful relationships and impactful contributions are born from shared experiences of sadness and recovery. Frustration is perhaps the most commonly experienced negative emotion in modern life, and it's also the most commonly wasted. Frustration arises when there's a gap between where you are and where you want to be. Most people let frustration drain their energy through complaining or giving up. But frustration is actually a signal that you care deeply about improvement. The energy of frustration can be transformed into determination and persistence. Instead of being frustrated by obstacles, become fascinated by them. Instead of being frustrated by setbacks, become more committed to finding solutions. Instead of being frustrated by limitations, become more focused on developing capabilities. Anxiety and worry are forward-looking emotions that most people experience as torture. But anxiety contains important planning information about potential challenges you need to prepare for. Instead of trying to eliminate anxiety, use it as a strategic planning tool. What specifically are you worried about? What would you need to do to address those concerns? How can you prepare for the challenges you're anticipating? Transform vague anxiety into specific action plans. Most anxiety is caused by unclear threats and uncertain timelines. When you force yourself to get specific, anxiety often transforms into useful preparation. Guilt and shame are perhaps the most painful emotions, but they contain crucial information about your values and integrity. Guilt tells you when your actions don't align with your values. Shame tells you when your behavior doesn't align with your identity. Both emotions are painful precisely because they indicate misalignment. Instead of trying to escape guilt and shame, use them as course correction signals. What do these emotions tell you about what you value? What changes do you need to make to better align your actions with your values? The key to transforming any negative emotion is approaching it with curiosity rather than resistance. Instead of asking, "How can I make this feeling go away?" ask, "What is this feeling trying to tell me? How can I use this energy productively? What action can I take that honors the message while moving me toward my goals?" This transformation requires practice. Your habitual response to negative emotions has been reinforced over many years. It won't change overnight. But every time you choose to transform, rather than suppress or indulge a negative emotion, you build neural pathways that make this process more automatic. The goal isn't to become someone who never experiences negative emotions. The goal is to become someone who can quickly transform those emotions into fuel for positive action. When you master this skill, setbacks become setups, obstacles become opportunities, and the very experiences that break most people become the experiences that make you stronger. Chapter 10. Building Unshakable Confidence Through Emotional Mastery. Confidence is not what most people think it is. It's not the absence of doubt or fear. It's not believing you'll never fail or face challenges. It's not thinking you're better than other people or that success is guaranteed. Real confidence is something much deeper and more powerful. True confidence is the unshakable knowledge that you can handle whatever life throws at you. It's the quiet certainty that you have the emotional tools, mental frameworks, and inner resources to navigate any challenge, setback, or uncertainty. It's not about never falling down. It's about knowing you can always get back up. This kind of confidence can only be built one way: through repeatedly facing difficult situations and proving to yourself that you can handle them with grace. You cannot think your way to confidence. You cannot affirm your way there. You cannot fake it. You can only build confidence through evidence, and evidence comes from action. But here's what most people get wrong. They think they need to wait until they feel confident before taking action. They think confidence is a prerequisite for facing challenges rather than a result of facing them. This backwards thinking keeps them trapped in cycles of self-doubt because they're waiting for a feeling that can only come from doing the very things they're afraid to do. The confidence-building process works in reverse. You take action despite feeling uncertain or afraid. You handle the situation better than you expected. You extract the lessons and grow stronger. Your brain updates its assessment of your capabilities. Your confidence increases. Then you're ready for slightly bigger challenges, and the cycle continues. This is why emotional mastery is the foundation of unshakable confidence. When you know you can control your reactions regardless of what happens, when you know you can stay calm under pressure, when you know you can think clearly even when emotions are running high, you develop an inner certainty that makes you nearly impossible to shake. Most people's confidence is built on external factors they can't control. They feel confident when things are going well, when others approve of them, when they're successful by conventional standards. But this kind of confidence is fragile because it depends on circumstances that can change at any moment. Real confidence is built on internal factors you can control. The first pillar is emotional self-reliance. This is the knowledge that your emotional state doesn't depend on other people's behavior, external circumstances, or unpredictable events. You know you can generate the emotional states you need through your own thoughts, actions, and practices. You don't need others to make you feel good about yourself, and you don't let others' negativity drag you down. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally disconnected or not caring about relationships. It means engaging with others from a position of strength rather than neediness. You contribute to relationships rather than draining them. Emotional self-reliance is built through consistent practice of the regulation techniques you've learned. Every time you successfully manage your emotional state during a challenging situation, you prove to yourself that you have this capability. Every time you choose your response rather than reacting automatically, you build evidence that you're in control of your inner experience. The second pillar is competence building. Confidence without competence is just delusion. You need to actually be good at things that matter. You need to develop real skills, real knowledge, and real abilities that create genuine value. But competence building isn't just about technical skills. It's about developing meta skills that make you effective in any domain. Problem solving is perhaps the most important meta skill. When you know you can figure things out, when you have a systematic approach to breaking down complex challenges, you become much more willing to take on difficult situations. You're not intimidated by unfamiliar problems because you trust your ability to learn and adapt. Communication is another crucial meta skill. When you can express ideas clearly, listen effectively, and navigate difficult conversations with skill, you become more confident in social and professional situations. You're not afraid of conflict because you know how to handle it constructively. Learning agility is the meta skill that makes all other skills possible. This is your ability to quickly acquire new knowledge and capabilities as needed. When you know you can learn anything you need to learn, you're not limited by your current knowledge. You become confident about taking on challenges that require skills you don't yet have because you trust your ability to develop them. The third pillar is integrity alignment. This is the consistency between your values, your words, and your actions. When these three elements are aligned, you develop an inner strength that makes you nearly impossible to shake. When they're misaligned, you feel weak and uncertain because you're not sure who you really are or what you stand for. Most people compromise their integrity gradually through small decisions that seem insignificant at the time. They tell little lies to avoid discomfort. They make commitments they don't keep. They act in ways that contradict their stated values. Each compromise weakens their foundation and erodes their confidence. Building integrity alignment requires ruthless honesty about what you actually value versus what you think you should value. It requires making your word mean something by only making commitments you intend to keep. It requires having courage to act in accordance with your values even when it's difficult. When your integrity is intact, you develop what I call unshakable presence. People can sense that you're authentic, that you're comfortable with who you are. This presence is magnetic and creates opportunities that aren't available to people who are constantly trying to impress others or fit in. The fourth pillar is resilience building. This is your track record of recovering from setbacks, learning from failures, and coming back stronger. Every time you face adversity and emerge better than before, you build evidence that challenges don't break you, they make you stronger. Most people try to avoid adversity, but this actually weakens their confidence because they never prove to themselves that they can handle difficult situations. They remain fragile and fearful because they have no evidence of their own resilience. Building unshakable confidence requires deliberately seeking challenges that test your limits and force you to grow. This doesn't mean being reckless or seeking unnecessary suffering. It means choosing growth over comfort, challenge over security, expansion over safety. The key is approaching these challenges with the right mindset. You're not trying to prove you're already perfect. You're trying to prove you can learn and grow. You're not trying to never fail. You're trying to prove you can recover from failure. You're not trying to avoid mistakes. You're trying to prove you can learn from them and become better. The fifth pillar is future orientation. This is your ability to make decisions based on who you're becoming rather than who you are right now. It's understanding that your current limitations are temporary and that your potential for growth is virtually unlimited. Most people are trapped by past experiences and current limitations. They think, "I'm not good at public speaking," or "I'm not a leader," or "I'm not confident enough." This fixed mindset keeps them stuck because they base decisions on current capabilities rather than future potential. Building future orientation requires regularly visualizing the person you're becoming and making decisions from that future identity. Ask yourself, what would the confident version of me do in this situation? Then do that thing, even if you don't feel ready. Act as if you're already the person you want to become, and eventually, you will become that person. The sixth pillar is contribution focus. This is the shift from "what can I get" to "what can I give?" When you focus on how you can add value, solve problems, and help others succeed, you become less self-conscious and more naturally confident. You're not worried about being judged because you're focused on being useful. Most confidence issues stem from excessive self-focus. When you're constantly worried about how you look, what others think, whether you're measuring up, you create anxiety and self-doubt. But when you shift focus to how you can contribute, these concerns naturally fade into the background. This doesn't mean neglecting your own needs. It means approaching situations with a service mindset rather than a self-protection mindset. Instead of, "I hope I don't embarrass myself," think, "How can I make this meeting productive?" Instead of, "I hope they like me," think, "How can I be genuinely helpful?" The final element is evidence awareness. This is the practice of consciously recognizing and remembering your successes, growth, and progress, rather than focusing only on failures and limitations. Most people have a negativity bias that causes them to remember failures more vividly than successes, and to discount achievements while magnifying mistakes. Combat this bias by keeping a success journal where you record daily wins, no matter how small. Document challenges you've overcome, skills you've developed, positive feedback you've received. Review this evidence regularly to maintain an accurate picture of your capabilities and progress. Building unshakable confidence is not about becoming arrogant or believing you're better than others. It's about developing an accurate assessment of your capabilities and a realistic optimism about your potential for growth. It's about knowing you can handle whatever comes your way, not because nothing bad will ever happen, but because you have the tools to deal with whatever does happen. When you combine emotional mastery with competence building, integrity alignment, resilience development, future orientation, contribution focus, and evidence awareness, you create a foundation of confidence that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. You become the person who stays calm in chaos, who sees opportunity in adversity, and who inspires others through your unshakable presence and authentic strength. Chapter 11. The Art of Non-Reaction in Relationships. Relationships are where emotional control matters most and where most people fail most spectacularly. You can master your emotions in every other area of your life, but if you lose control with the people closest to you, you'll sabotage the very relationships that matter most. The people who love you see you at your worst, when you're tired, stressed, and emotionally depleted. This is when your true level of emotional mastery is revealed. And here's the thing. Most relationship conflicts aren't about the surface issue being discussed. They're about underlying emotional patterns, unmet needs, and unconscious triggers that both people are reacting to without awareness. When you learn to not react emotionally during relationship conflicts, you can address the real issues instead of getting caught in endless cycles of blame, defensiveness, and escalation. But this requires understanding some fundamental principles about how relationships actually work. The first principle is understanding that every interaction is a choice between connection and control. When you're emotionally reactive, you're choosing control. You're trying to make the other person wrong, to prove your point, to defend your position. But when you choose non-reaction, you're choosing connection. You're prioritizing the relationship over being right. This doesn't mean becoming a doormat or accepting unacceptable behavior. It means responding to problematic situations in ways that preserve dignity and create possibilities for resolution, rather than just venting your emotional reactions. It means being strong enough to stay calm when the other person is losing control. The second principle is taking responsibility for your 50% of every interaction. You cannot control the other person's words, actions, or emotional state, but you have complete control over your response. When you focus on controlling your 50%, instead of trying to control their 50%, you become incredibly powerful in relationships. Most people spend their relationship energy trying to change, fix, or control their partner, children, or friends. This is exhausting and ineffective, because you're trying to control things outside your control. When you redirect that energy toward managing your own responses, you become a calming, stabilizing force that actually influences others to be their best selves. The third principle is learning to de-escalate rather than escalate conflicts. When someone is emotionally activated, your natural tendency might be to match their energy level. They raise their voice, you raise yours. They become critical, you become defensive. They withdraw, you pursue. This unconscious mirroring amplifies conflict instead of resolving it. Strategic non-reaction means consciously choosing to lower the emotional temperature. Speak more quietly when they speak loudly. Become more curious when they become critical. Give space when they're overwhelmed. This counterintuitive approach often breaks the negative pattern and creates space for actual communication. The fourth principle is separating the person from their behavior. When someone you care about does something hurtful or frustrating, your emotional reaction tends to globalize the behavior. Instead of thinking, "They did something inconsiderate," you think, "They are an inconsiderate person." This generalization makes it much harder to maintain emotional equilibrium
and find constructive solutions. Practice seeing difficult behavior as information about the other person's current state, rather than evidence of their permanent character. Maybe they're stressed, tired, overwhelmed, or dealing with something you don't know about. This doesn't excuse poor behavior, but it helps you respond with wisdom rather than reactive emotion. The fifth principle is mastering the pause. In heated moments, there's enormous pressure to respond immediately. Silence feels uncomfortable, and you feel compelled to defend, explain, or counterattack right away. But the pause is where your power lies. It's where you can choose your response instead of being controlled by impulses. Practice saying, "I need a moment to think about that," or "Let me consider what you're saying," or simply taking 3 deep breaths before responding. These small pauses can completely change the trajectory of a conversation
and often prevent conflicts that would have taken days or weeks to repair. The most advanced relationship skill is what I call emotional redirection. This is the ability to redirect someone else's emotional energy rather than absorbing it or fighting against it. When someone is angry at you, instead of getting defensive or angry back, you acknowledge their feelings and redirect the conversation toward solutions. When someone is criticizing you, instead of justifying your actions, you thank them for their perspective and ask for their suggestions. This approach requires tremendous emotional strength because it goes against every instinct to defend yourself when you feel attacked. But it's incredibly effective because it de-energizes conflict and redirects the interaction toward cooperation instead of competition. Think about the relationships that matter most to you. How would they change if you consistently chose non-reaction over reaction? How would your kids benefit from seeing you handle emotions with maturity? How would your partner feel if they knew they could count on you to stay calm during difficult conversations? How would your friendships deepen if people knew you wouldn't add drama to already challenging situations? You cannot control whether other people choose to be emotionally reactive, but you can control whether you join them in that reactivity. When you consistently choose non-reaction in relationships, you become a source of stability and peace that others gravitate toward. You become the person others turn to during difficult times because they know you won't add to the chaos. Chapter 12: Emotional Leadership and Creating Positive Impact. Leadership is fundamentally about emotional influence. Your ability to inspire, motivate, and guide others depends far more on your emotional mastery than on your technical skills or positional authority. People follow leaders who make them feel confident, capable, and valued. They resist leaders who create anxiety, frustration, or self-doubt, regardless of how smart or experienced those leaders might be. The most powerful form of leadership is emotional modeling. People learn more from what you do than from what you say, especially when it comes to emotional responses. When you remain calm under pressure, others feel permission to be calm. When you respond to setbacks with resilience and problem-solving, others learn to do the same. When you treat difficulties as challenges rather than catastrophes, you teach others to adopt that perspective. This means that every emotional choice you make as a leader is not just about you. It's about the emotional culture you're creating for everyone around you. Your team, your family, Your organization will tend to mirror your emotional patterns. If you're reactive, they'll become reactive. If you're anxious, they'll become anxious. If you're calm and solution-focused, they'll adopt those qualities. The first skill of emotional leadership is creating psychological safety. This is the feeling that people can express ideas, ask questions, admit mistakes, and show vulnerability without fear of judgment, punishment, or rejection. Psychological safety is created through your emotional responses to other people's imperfections and uncertainties. When someone makes a mistake, your first response sets the tone. If you react with anger, blame, or criticism, you teach everyone to hide their mistakes and avoid taking risks. If you respond with curiosity about what can be learned and focus on preventing similar mistakes in the future, you create an environment where people feel safe to be honest and innovative. The second skill is managing emotional contagion. Emotions are literally contagious through mirror neuron activity and social conditioning. When you walk into a room, your emotional state influences everyone else's state, often unconsciously. This gives you enormous power to influence the energy and productivity of any group. Before entering important interactions, consciously choose the emotional state you want to transmit. If you want the meeting to be productive and collaborative, embody those qualities yourself. If you want your team to feel confident about a challenging project, make sure you genuinely feel and express confidence. If you want your family to feel peaceful and connected, bring that energy to your interactions. The third skill is strategic emotional authenticity. This doesn't mean expressing every emotion you feel without filter. It means being genuine about your emotional state while choosing expressions that serve the situation and the people involved. You can be authentically concerned about a problem while expressing that concern in ways that motivate rather than discourage. Sometimes authenticity means sharing your vulnerabilities and uncertainties to create connection and trust. Other times it means projecting strength and confidence to help others feel secure. The key is matching your emotional expression to what the situation requires while remaining true to your core values and character. The fourth skill is conflict transformation. Most people either avoid conflict or handle it poorly. But leaders must be able to navigate disagreements and tensions in ways that strengthen rather than damage relationships. This requires seeing conflict as information about differing perspectives and unmet needs, rather than as personal attacks or character defects. When conflict arises, your emotional response determines whether it becomes destructive or constructive. If you remain calm, curious, and focused on understanding different viewpoints, you can often transform conflicts into breakthrough conversations that lead to better solutions and stronger relationships. The fifth skill is empathetic leadership without emotional absorption. You need to be able to understand and relate to other people's emotional experiences without taking on their emotional states as your own. This means you can be compassionate towards someone who's anxious without becoming anxious yourself. You can be supportive of someone going through difficulties without being dragged down by their problems. This balance requires strong emotional boundaries and a clear sense of your own emotional identity. You care about others deeply, but you don't lose yourself in their emotional experiences. You provide stability and support precisely because you maintain your own emotional center. The ultimate goal of emotional leadership is creating what I call an upward emotional spiral. This is when your emotional mastery inspires others to develop their own emotional mastery, which creates a positive feedback loop that elevates everyone's performance and well-being. Instead of managing other people's emotions, you're developing their capacity to manage their own emotions. This happens when you consistently model emotional intelligence, provide tools and frameworks for emotional development, celebrate emotional growth in others, and create environments where emotional mastery is valued and rewarded. Over time, you build teams, families, and organizations that are emotionally resilient, highly productive, and deeply fulfilling to be part of. You become the kind of leader people remember not just for what you accomplished, but for how you made them feel and who you helped them become. Chapter 13. Creating your personal emotional operating system. Everything you've learned means nothing unless you create a systematic approach to implementing it in your daily life. Most people consume information about emotional control, but never develop the consistent practices that turn knowledge into automatic behavior. They understand the concepts intellectually, but continue operating from old emotional patterns because they haven't created new systems to replace the old ones. Your emotional operating system is the set of daily practices, environmental designs, and response protocols that make emotional mastery your default mode, rather than something you have to consciously remember to do. Just like a computer's operating system runs in the background, managing all basic functions automatically, your emotional operating system should manage your emotional responses automatically. The first component is your daily emotional fitness routine. Just like physical fitness requires regular exercise, emotional fitness requires regular practice. This doesn't need to be complicated or time-consuming, but it does need to be consistent. 5 to 10 minutes of focused emotional training every day will create more transformation than hours of sporadic effort. Your routine should include some form of mindfulness or awareness practice to strengthen your ability to notice emotional states as they arise. It should include breathing exercises to train your nervous system to respond to stress with calm rather than reactivity. It should include some form of reflection, like journaling, to identify patterns and plan improvements. The key is making this non-negotiable, not something you do when you have time, but something you prioritize because you understand it's the foundation of everything else in your life. Think of it like brushing your teeth. You don't skip it because you're busy. You do it because you know the long-term consequences of not doing it. The second component is environmental design for emotional success. Your physical and social environment has an enormous impact on your emotional state, often without your conscious awareness. If you're constantly exposed to negative news, chaotic spaces, or emotionally reactive people, maintaining emotional equilibrium becomes exponentially harder regardless of your skills. Audit your environment ruthlessly. What inputs are you consuming through media, social media, books, conversations? What does your physical space communicate about calm and order versus chaos and stress? Who are you spending time with, and how do they influence your emotional state? Make changes that support the emotional state you want to maintain. This might mean unfollowing accounts that trigger negative emotions. It might mean creating a dedicated space in your home for calm and reflection. It might mean spending less time with people who drain your energy and more time with people who elevate you. The third component is trigger identification and response planning. You need to become intimately familiar with your personal emotional triggers and have specific strategies ready for each one. This isn't about avoiding triggers, which is impossible, but about having planned responses that align with your values and goals. Keep a trigger journal for 2 weeks. Every time you have an emotional reaction, write down what triggered it, what you felt, how you responded, and what you wish you had done differently. Look for patterns in the types of situations, people, and circumstances that tend to activate you. Then develop specific response strategies for each category of trigger. If you know that criticism from authority figures tends to make you defensive, prepare a specific response. Thank you for that feedback. Let me think about it and get back to you. If you know that feeling excluded triggers anxiety, prepare a reframe. This doesn't mean they don't like me. People have their own lives and priorities. The fourth component is recovery protocols. You need systematic ways to restore your emotional equilibrium after challenging situations or periods of high stress. Without effective recovery, emotional challenges accumulate and eventually overwhelm your capacity to maintain control. Your recovery toolkit should include immediate techniques you can use in the moment, like the pause method. It should include short-term practices you can implement within hours of a stressful event, like going for a walk or talking with a trusted friend. And it should include longer-term restoration practices for recovering from extended periods of high stress, like taking a weekend retreat or getting back into a regular exercise routine. Have these ready before you need them, not after. When you're in the middle of stress or overwhelm, is not the time to figure out what helps you recover. Know your recovery tools and deploy them proactively. The fifth component is accountability and measurement. You need ways to track your progress, identify areas for improvement, and maintain motivation during difficult periods. This could be as simple as a daily rating of your emotional control on a scale of 1 to 10, or as detailed as keeping logs of specific situations and responses. The key is having objective measures of progress rather than relying on feelings, which can be unreliable indicators of actual improvement. You might feel like you're not making progress even when you're actually improving significantly. Or you might feel like you're doing well when you're actually sliding backward. Measurement keeps you honest and helps you see patterns you might otherwise miss. The sixth component is continuous learning and adaptation. Your emotional operating system should evolve as you grow and as your life circumstances change. What works in your 20s might not work in your 40s. What works when you're single might not work when you have a family. What works during stable periods might not work during major transitions. Schedule regular reviews of your system. Monthly check-ins where you ask, what's working well? What needs adjustment? What new challenges am I facing that require new strategies? What feedback am I getting about my emotional patterns? Use this information to continuously refine your approach. The final component is integration with your larger life systems. Your emotional operating system cannot be separate from your other life management systems. It needs to be integrated with your goal-setting process, your time management approach, your relationship strategies, and your career development plans. This means making emotional considerations part of every major decision. Before taking on new responsibilities, consider the emotional demands they'll create. Before entering new relationships, consider how they'll impact your well-being. Before pursuing new goals, consider what emotional skills you'll need to develop to achieve them successfully. Remember, The goal is not to create a perfect system that never needs adjustment. The goal is to create a robust system that makes emotional mastery easier and more automatic, while remaining flexible enough to adapt to changing circumstances. Your emotional operating system should serve you, not constrain you. Chapter 14. Advanced Applications in Critical Situations. The ultimate test of your emotional mastery comes in critical situations where the consequences of losing control are severe and immediate. These are moments where careers can be destroyed with a single emotional outburst, where relationships can be permanently damaged by one reactive moment, where opportunities worth years of work can be lost because someone couldn't manage their anxiety or anger. Critical situations reveal the difference between intellectual understanding of emotional control and true embodied mastery. When everything is on the line, when you're being tested beyond your comfort zone, when the pressure is intense and the stakes are real, your true level of emotional development becomes clear. The first category is crisis management. When something goes seriously wrong, when there's immediate danger or significant loss, when people are looking to you for leadership and stability, your emotional response sets the tone for everyone else's response. Panic is contagious, but so is calm competence. In crisis situations, the ability to think clearly while others are losing their minds becomes a superpower. While everyone else is being hijacked by their alarm systems, you remain connected to your rational brain. While others are reacting to emotional intensity, you're focusing on practical steps needed to address actual problems. This requires advanced preparation. You cannot develop crisis emotional management skills during the crisis. You develop them during calm periods through visualization, stress inoculation training, and practice with smaller challenges. By the time the real crisis hits, your emotional control responses need to be automatic. The second category is high-stakes negotiations and confrontations. Whether you're negotiating a business deal, handling a workplace conflict, or dealing with aggressive behavior from others, your ability to remain emotionally centered gives you enormous strategic advantages. People reveal their true intentions and limitations when they're emotionally activated, but they can only take advantage of your emotional reactions if you have them. The key to negotiation emotional mastery is separating your ego from the outcome. When you're emotionally invested in being right, in getting your way, or in proving your point, you become predictable and manipulable. When you can remain detached from any specific outcome while staying committed to your core interests, you become incredibly difficult to manipulate or intimidate. This doesn't mean not caring about the outcome. It means caring more about the process than the result, more about maintaining your integrity than winning the negotiation. The third category is performance under scrutiny. When you're presenting to important audiences, being evaluated for promotions, competing at high levels, or otherwise performing while being watched and judged, emotional control becomes crucial for accessing your full capabilities. Performance anxiety, imposter syndrome, and fear of judgment can completely undermine your actual skills and preparation. The solution is shifting focus from how you're being perceived to how you're serving others. Instead of thinking about whether you look confident, think about how you can provide value to your audience. Instead of worrying about making mistakes, focus on executing the process you've prepared. The fourth category is dealing with extremely difficult people. Every field has people who are manipulative, aggressive, unreasonable, or emotionally volatile. Your ability to maintain your center while interacting with these individuals determines whether they drain your energy and compromise your effectiveness, or whether you can work with them productively despite their limitations. The key is not taking their behavior personally. Difficult people are usually difficult with everyone, not just you. Their emotional reactions are about their internal state, not about you specifically. When you can see their behavior as information about their stress level, insecurity, or coping skills, rather than as personal attacks, you can respond strategically rather than reactively. The fifth category is managing your own success and failure. Both extreme success and extreme failure can trigger powerful emotional responses that lead to poor decisions. Success can trigger arrogance, complacency, or reckless risk-taking. Failure can trigger shame, despair, or the impulse to give up entirely. Emotional mastery means maintaining perspective and equilibrium regardless of external outcomes. Success is information about what worked, not evidence that you're permanently superior. Failure is information about what didn't work, not evidence that you're permanently inadequate. Both are temporary conditions that require appropriate responses rather than emotional reactions. The ultimate critical situation is your own mind during moments of extreme challenge, uncertainty, or change. When everything you've counted on seems to be falling apart, when the future feels completely uncertain, when you're facing losses or changes that challenge your identity and assumptions, your relationship with your own thoughts and emotions becomes the most important factor in your ability to navigate successfully. This is where all your emotional mastery training pays off. When external circumstances are chaotic, you become your own source of stability. When others are panicking about uncertainty, you become comfortable with not knowing. When everyone else is being overwhelmed by the magnitude of the challenge, you break it down into manageable steps and take them one at a time. The goal is not to become someone who never feels the emotional impact of critical situations. The goal is to become someone who can feel that impact fully, while choosing responses that serve your long-term interests and values, rather than just relieving immediate emotional pressure. Chapter 15. The compound effect of emotional mastery. Most people dramatically underestimate the long-term impact of emotional control because they only see the immediate effects of individual choices. They see that staying calm during one argument prevented a fight. They see that managing anxiety during one presentation led to better performance. They see that not reacting to one criticism preserved a relationship. These immediate benefits are significant, but they're nothing compared to the compound effects that build over months, years, and decades. Emotional mastery works like compound interest. Each individual choice to respond, rather than react, seems small in the moment, but these choices accumulate exponentially over time. Every time you choose emotional control, you're not just improving that one situation, you're strengthening neural pathways that make emotional control easier in all future situations. You're building a reputation for reliability and wisdom that creates opportunities. You're developing inner resources that compound and multiply. The first compound effect is relational trust. Every time you remain calm when others expect you to lose control, every time you respond with wisdom when others are being reactive, every time you choose connection over being right, you make deposits in the trust accounts of your relationships. Over time, these deposits create deep reservoirs of trust that become incredibly valuable during difficult periods. People know they can count on you when things get tough. They seek your perspective during challenging decisions. They want you on their team during high-pressure projects. They trust you with their vulnerabilities and their most important concerns. This level of trust opens doors that remain closed to people who are emotionally unpredictable. The second compound effect is reputation and influence. Your emotional patterns become part of your personal brand, often more important than your technical skills or achievements. People remember how you made them feel, much more than what you accomplished. When you consistently demonstrate emotional mastery, you develop a reputation as someone who can be trusted with important responsibilities and challenging situations. This reputation creates a positive feedback loop. You get opportunities that require emotional maturity. Successfully handling these opportunities builds your skills and confidence. Your enhanced capabilities lead to even greater opportunities. The third compound effect is decision-making quality. When you're not being driven by emotional reactions, you make consistently better decisions across every area of your life. You choose relationships based on compatibility and shared values rather than intense chemistry that burns out quickly. You make career choices based on long-term growth potential rather than immediate gratification or fear-based security. You invest money based on rational analysis rather than greed or fear. You choose how to spend your time based on priorities and goals rather than whatever feels urgent in the moment. You handle conflicts based on what will strengthen relationships rather than what will make you feel better immediately. These better decisions compound over time into dramatically better life outcomes. The fourth compound effect is stress resilience and health benefits. Chronic emotional reactivity creates chronic stress, which has devastating effects on physical and mental health over time. Elevated stress hormones damage your immune system, impair cognitive function, accelerate aging, and increase risk for virtually every major disease. When you master emotional control, you dramatically reduce your stress levels and improve your health outcomes. You sleep better, think more clearly, have more energy, and maintain better physical health. These health benefits compound over decades, potentially adding years to your life and significantly improving the quality of those years. The fifth compound effect is learning acceleration. When you're not constantly dealing with emotional drama and reactivity, you free up enormous amounts of mental and emotional energy that can be redirected toward growth and learning. Instead of spending your energy managing the consequences of emotional reactions, you can invest that energy in developing new skills, pursuing meaningful goals, and expanding your capabilities. Emotional mastery also makes you a better learner by improving your ability to receive feedback, handle criticism, and learn from failures. When you're not defensive or reactive, you can extract lessons from challenging experiences instead of just being hurt by them. This accelerated learning creates competitive advantages that compound over time. The sixth compound effect is opportunity creation. When you have emotional mastery, you become the kind of person that other high performers want to work with. You get invited to join important projects, teams, and organizations. You become trusted with sensitive information and critical responsibilities. You gain access to networks and relationships that create opportunities for advancement and achievement. These opportunities often lead to more opportunities in an upward spiral of growth and success. Each success builds your confidence and capabilities, making you ready for even greater challenges. Over time, you gain access to levels of achievement and influence that seemed impossible when you were still trapped in emotional reactivity. The seventh compound effect is inner peace and life satisfaction. Perhaps most importantly, emotional mastery creates a deep sense of inner peace and satisfaction that comes from knowing you're living according to your values and responding to life from wisdom rather than fear. You develop an inner stability that's not dependent on external circumstances. This inner peace is not the absence of challenge or difficulty. It's the presence of confidence that you can handle whatever life presents. You know that external circumstances are temporary, but your ability to respond with wisdom and grace is permanent. The ultimate compound effect of emotional mastery is becoming what I call anti-fragile. This means you don't just survive challenges and setbacks, you become stronger because of them. Every difficult situation becomes an opportunity to practice and strengthen your emotional skills. Every person who tries to upset you becomes unwitting training for greater mastery. When you reach this level of emotional development, you become virtually unshakable, not because nothing difficult ever happens to you, but because you have unshakable confidence in your ability to handle whatever does happen. You become a source of strength and stability for others. A person who makes every situation better simply by being present and emotionally centered. Conclusion: your journey begins now. We've covered a lot of ground together, from understanding why your brain is wired the way it is, to practical techniques for controlling your reactions in the moment, to building long-term resilience and confidence. You now have the knowledge, the frameworks, and the tools to transform your relationship with your emotions. But knowledge alone changes nothing. You can understand every concept in this material perfectly and still live the exact same reactive life you've always lived. The difference between understanding and transformation is action. Consistent, deliberate, committed action. The journey from where you are now to where you want to be won't be easy. Old patterns have deep roots. Your brain has spent years, maybe decades, reinforcing the neural pathways of emotional reactivity. Those pathways won't disappear overnight just because you've decided you want to change. You're going to have setbacks. You're going to have moments where you react emotionally despite knowing better. You're going to disappoint yourself. You're going to wonder if you're actually capable of real change. This is all normal. This is all part of the process. The question is not whether you'll stumble, but whether you'll get back up. Remember, emotional mastery is not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about being slightly better today than you were yesterday. It's about catching yourself a little earlier, recovering a little faster, learning a little more from each experience. Start small. Don't try to implement everything at once. Choose one technique, one practice, one area of your life where you want to see improvement. Master that. Build that into your automatic behavior. Then add the next thing. Then the next. This is how lasting transformation happens. One small, consistent choice at a time. The world needs people who can stay calm when everyone else is losing their minds, who can think clearly when emotions are running high, who can choose wisdom over reactivity, connection over conflict, growth over comfort. The world needs people like that, and you can become one of them. Your emotions are not your enemy. They're information. They're energy. They're part of what makes you human. The goal is not to eliminate them, but to master them, to work with them instead of being controlled by them, to transform their energy into fuel for achieving your most important goals and becoming your best self. Every moment is a new opportunity to choose differently. Every interaction is a chance to practice. Every challenge is an invitation to grow stronger. The power to control your emotions, instead of being controlled by them, has always been within you. Now you have the map to access that power. The choice is yours. You can continue living at the mercy of your emotional reactions, letting temporary feelings drive permanent decisions, remaining trapped in cycles of regret and limitation. Or you can commit to the patient, consistent practice of emotional mastery and unlock the compound benefits that will transform every aspect of your life. The time to start is now, not tomorrow when you feel more motivated, not next week when your schedule is clearer, not next year when your life is less stressful. Now, because every day you delay is another day of lost compound interest on the most important investment you can make, the investment in your own emotional development and inner mastery. You have everything you need. You have the knowledge, you have the tools, you have the potential. Now, you just need the commitment to show up every day and do the work, the commitment to keep going even when progress feels slow, the commitment to become the person you know you're capable of being. Your future self is waiting for you on the other side of this transformation. The person who stays calm under pressure, who makes wise decisions when stakes are high, who builds deep, meaningful relationships, who inspires others through their unshakable presence and authentic strength. That person is not some distant fantasy. That person is who you become through the daily practice of choosing response over reaction. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Take that step today. Take the next step tomorrow. Keep taking steps, one after another, until the journey becomes who you are. Your emotional mastery journey starts now. Let's go.